Welcome to episode 5 of the GAA Performance Podcast. Our guest this week is Dublin GAA legend Paul Clarke. An All-Star and All-Ireland winner as a player, he went on to be a Dublin senior coach, selector and manager, and he played a key role under Jim Gavin and Dessie Farrell on those famous 6 in a row All-Ireland winning teams. Loyalty, integrity, passion, these are the kinds of words I associate with Clarkey, and I was lucky enough to be coached by him during my own playing time in DCU. And he talks to us in this podcast about developing skill sets, behaviours, team culture and team mindsets, and what it is that makes certain players stand out when you watch them play Dublin club games or Byrne Cup games, and what made certain players take their opportunity when they were brought into the Dublin senior squad. I did my best here to take away as many learnings as I could from this conversation, and there's a lot of learning in it, while still respecting that Clarkey has a lot of close relationships with players and coaches still involved in that Dublin senior setup. So I really appreciate his time and him spreading the knowledge for the betterment of the GAA. Enjoy.
Sherlock really half hit that one, but it's Paul Clarke who's in fisting. And it's a goal! It's a goal for Dublin! Paul Clarke, the goal scorer!
Thanks for joining us, Clarkey. We get straight into it. First question I wanted to ask you was, you've been involved in GAA for so many years, first as a player at the top level and then as a manager and as a coach at club and county level, different teams, different decades, right up to Jim Gavin and Dessie Farrell's teams now, Peter Caffrey's teams, and I said, when you were playing yourself, what is it about the GAA that kind of gets your blood flowing and gets your passions up, and what is it that you love most?
I suppose my background was in GAA. It was more soccer from underage up to about, say, 13 years of age, and then turned out my best pal, Michal Crowley. We had been in primary school together and then went to secondary school together, and had a bit of a bad experience one day playing soccer. Well, not playing, I wasn't picked to play, and then Michal in school said, "Look, you'll have to come and play for the school team and play Gaelic and then join Whitehall, Colin Kills." So he looked out for me back in those days. We played together, at midfield, we were a midfield partnership, and I just got a friendship there that I knew that was loyal to me, and I enjoyed that. And then got a group of friends from football through school and through club that was just something different that I hadn't seen before. And maybe I was matured and I was in my teens, and I was getting a little bit of recognition, made it onto Dublin under 14 squads fairly quickly, and then onto a minor. But each time when you were going to a different group, it just brought it to a different level. It was very competitive. I was athletic enough, anyway, at a young age, that was challenged me. And I felt that maybe there was something in this, that Gaelic football was something that I could enjoy. I was enjoying the friendships initially, and then that sort of pushed on from there. And I suppose, I was fortunate enough to do really well at club level, and then be a Dublin minor captain. Soon after, then Kevin Heffernan brought me into a senior football panel. I was looking up to players like Brian Mullins and Kieran Duff was there, Charlie Redmond, Pat Hanneman, guys that had won All Irelands in '83 for Dublin. Now you're in a dressing room with them, but you felt that you were part of something special even then, and it just made my juices flow. I liked the way we trained. I liked the competitiveness of training. I had to work really hard on skills, but that I didn't mind at all. I just liked that. So obviously, those early years, the 85, 6 and 7, 88 wasn't so successful for Dublin. And then we sort of broke through 89, winning the Leinster, getting to an All-Ireland semi-final. And then, like I said, there was a group of players that stuck together from those late 80s right through the 90s. And that gave you another group of friends, another group that you'd go to war with. And it made me enjoy it. Obviously, when you finish playing, I went straight from sort of county footballer to club footballer stroke manager, and then you're spending more time with teammates that again you've gone through school with. I enjoyed that. It was very competitive. It was very difficult in Whitehall at the time because we had a very successful minor under 21 team, and everybody said we were going to succeed at senior, but we didn't, breach that gap and go well at senior. And soon after that, the great Dave Billings asked me to would I be interested going in as a selector with Paul Clarke, which was totally left field. I didn't see that coming at all. I had played with Pillar. What he's seen me as a coach, I don't know where it came from. I was a hard worker with the club. Like back then, you used to cut the grass. You used to get a tractor and cut the grass to the pitch. You used to line the pitch. We used to fertilise the pitch. We used to do it all ourselves. So maybe he thought I was able to do that for him. But I was a link then with DCU. I got to know Niall Moyna and Kieran Moran and Ken Robinson through DCU, and we set up a great relationship at that time. And I was so fortunate, like I was only 38, 39 at the time, so you're going in as a selector with a county team at that age. Some great, in the management team, we had Kieran Duff, we had Ski Wade, you had Brian Talty, fellas I played against, I was aware of. Ski Wade in particular was someone that from my very young days, I used to work in builders providers in Collins Avenue, and his garden was backed onto this, and it was the first time I really seen a Dublin jersey in real life was hanging on his washing line. And I knew his sister, and I said to his sister, can I have his jersey? And as only Ski would reply to her, tell him to get his own. So it's funny, I'm great friends with Ski now as it turns out, and through that management team. I finished with Pillar. I thought, that was it. That was my chance, and I really enjoyed the few years. That team came very, very close, but then we came up against some great Tyrone teams, and we had our difficulties against Mayo, and I thought, that I enjoy it. I go back to club management, and see where it took me, and the skills that I learned from that, I'll bring it through into a club scene. Few clubs I managed, and then out of nowhere, Jim contacted me when Dublin were going away on a team holiday and said, would I like to be involved with an O'Byrne Cup squad? That I'd go out and scout some players. They had a list of players that they wanted to look at, but he wanted me to oversee the training, which was minimal enough. All you were doing was getting the best Dublin club footballers that weren't in a county setup together, get them to know each other as well as possible, do very little on tactics and techniques, but just get them to know and understand each other, get them to know how lucky they are, how privileged they are to be involved in the Dublin setup, try as us as management and selectors to make us thorough and professional as possible. And that brought me on another level from my Pillar times as to how I was preparing the team. So it's been a build as it goes along. The blocks have been a bit unsteady at times, but I suppose to answer the question, originally it's about just a love for it and just a drive, and I like the challenge of it. And plus, I'm very lucky to be asked to be involved with a club or your county, and when that opportunity arises, you just can't say no to it.
You're talking about kind of even from the very first bits there about like kind of loving the camaraderie of it and having a group of lads who go to war with, like, or who'll be like you feel that they're being loyal to and stuff like that. Like from being involved in a management team that you were with, I felt that that's kind of what we as players really felt with you, in terms of that you had someone who really just wanted you to be better, and like really wanted you to, like when you looked out on the sideline of the game, was giving you advice, obviously to win the game, but to try and get you to do more, rather than like kind of giving out to you, or like just kind of shout. Like it was genuinely you generally felt like you wanted us to do this better or to do that better, to be better players, and that kind of creates a culture then, because then as a player you feel that loyalty and that trust, and you kind of want to push harder, and like for a player that's obviously a great thing to have. And then obviously as a management team, if you get all your players into that space, like is that something that you would have felt that you consciously brought as a manager, but you wanted your players to feel that way?
I suppose there's a number of aspects. There's a reality check yourself as a player, like is to try and prepare yourself as best you can. Obviously know your strengths and know what your weaknesses are. And Paddy Cullen used to say to us as players, like if you can sort of not look in the mirror, but say to yourself, God, I could not be prepared any better than what I am now. And look at yourself from head to toe and say, well, look, I look like a footballer. So therefore there's a chance that I am a footballer, and you're going to go out and challenge yourself. I loved training and I pushed myself really hard. So when I went to play against an opponent, again, I would say, well, look, if you're going to beat me today, if you're going to have a good game against me, you're going to be in your best form, because I'm trying to bring my best. And if that was the case, if a fella was better than you, well, then I had to go back to the drawing board and see how I could improve or what I could learn from him. But you had to learn very quickly. You had to learn in the moments of a game, early moments, important moments, quiet moments of a game, how you could develop. So I felt then, as a player, that's how I went about it. You look for weaknesses during games in an opponent, how you can punish it. But as a coach or someone on the sideline looking at players, I'd be really open-minded with anybody, to the point of that if I seen something small in someone and how they perform, how they caught a ball or how they kicked or how they ran, all positives, I would say, God, that was really good. I'd love to stop the clock or stop time for a second, run in beside them and say, I've just seen you do that. That is fantastic. Come off the pitch and start the clock again. I'd love to freeze time at time. So, to be in the middle of it, a training, you can sort of do that. And it's the same way on the flip side. If you see someone giving out to themselves or doing something silly, to be able to get in and say, look, I've noticed that, and this is how you responded. You were very negative to yourself. Like, what are you giving out to yourself about? What? Because, Gaelic football, it's not like American football where the play stops and you might be able to, reset yourself for the next move. Yeah. Gaelic football, you could give a ball away and 5 seconds later the ball could be coming straight back at you, or the opponent's coming straight back. So you don't have time to dwell on and the game is so quick, so you don't have time to dwell on bad mistakes or a mistake. So to be able to get into someone and say, well, look, the game passed you by for a few seconds there while you were feeling sorry for yourself. So I don't think, and there's a lot of pressure on players nowadays in particular, that they feel that pressure. They feel that they've made a mistake. They could be looking to the sideline, am I being taken off now? They might hear it in the crowd. They might get it from their own teammates. They more than likely will get it from an opponent, will tell you how bad that was, and verbally they'll give you that bit of pressure. So I think emotion and how you show emotion, positive and negative on the pitch, is crucial. So I like to say to someone, look, well done there, but at the same time, that's something you want to be doing all the time. Or, that wasn't your best. You can do better than that. But don't show your opponent that you're disappointed with it, because he's going to tell you even more so. So what I see at the time, I think is the best time to speak to someone about it. Obviously in big games in Croke Park you don't have that opportunity, but certainly if you've been speaking to someone about their game or how they're playing or something they need to bring, what I think would be good to their game, that in the dressing room at half time or after, just to look at them and they catch your eye and you might get a thumbs up or a nod to say, you don't have to say anything, I understand what I did there and I really enjoyed it because it worked well for me, or I understand that won't happen again, so.
I'm getting flashbacks now of just even games playing with TCU and different cues, I suppose, when I was playing that you would have been given about, I just even remember playing centre back and kind of about even where positioning yourself for breaks and stuff like that, and it gave it a massive feeling as a player as well that you were that the little things were being noticed, and you kind of felt like you could really hone in on the little things, which actually made playing a lot simpler because you could focus on those things. And one of the things is that when I try and think of that as watching the game, sometimes when we watch the game we get carried away in the emotion of the game, or sometimes people get so carried away in an overall kind of just wanting to win with managers. So when you're watching the game, you're obviously in a very you must be able to kind of really hone in on a specific, like on the small details. And is that just because you think you just kind of stay very calm there, or that's because that's what you love? But
yeah, it's what I love, and my focus may not be where the actual ball is. It may be on the periphery of where the ball is. It may be 50 yards back from where the play was, or it's 50 yards forward where the play is going, as to what players are doing or what they're saying, and how they are gesturing to their direct opponent if he's still beside him or not beside him, or if they're contributing to their teammates around. That there's still a communication, because too often in games players switch off for that split second. In this day and age, in high intensity games, you cannot afford to switch off for that split second. So I love watching players at either end of the pitch and how they're behaving and what they're doing to be ready for the next play. And if you can get it across to someone how important it is, and look, they don't have to take any of your opinion on board, but it's a way that I say it, like, you're talking about maybe a match next week. Well, if you try this might happen, and it doesn't happen. That doesn't mean it's not ever going to happen. They could be playing a club match in 2 years' time, and they might go, God, this is what Clarke said might happen. Now, I'm not saying everything I say is going to be true and right, but I think if someone can take it on board and it just put it in a bank somewhere in your head, that when you are playing it might actually occur to you.
I think as a player, like you have in the GA, you kind of have managers who are involved, because they kind of have a sense of duty for the club, and they love the club and they're helping the club a lot. And there's an element to that with everyone, or they want to give back after, there are people involved with them, and then you have some managers who want to get to the top of managing and coaching, and they see everything as a stepping stone towards that. But I think what you're talking about in terms of like loving, improving players and looking for those small things, like again, that for players, you're going to get the most out of a player with that, because they genuinely feel that you're there for those right reasons. The same way as a manager, if you're looking at players who are only there for themselves, you're not going to link with them as much. Like, and as a player, I think that you respond best to that type of coaching. And
again, the type of coach you are. Like, there are players that there don't respond to probably any interaction, but within a management team, and management teams nowadays can be large numbers, as we all know. But in that, say, the coaching setup, all you need to do is get on well with one coach. All you need to do is be able to have a conversation about the day in work, or did you change your car, or how's the wife or girlfriend, or something like that. So you have a small link. So therefore, then when it comes to maybe football matters, you can help, and he may just take that on board, and then sometimes that extends when a really good manager has his coaches and has a backroom team, your medical team, your physios or your doctors, your analysts, your statisticians. If he's trusting these guys as well, sometimes those members of that group can be as good a coaches as the coaches themselves, because they're talking to the players in different environments. They may be on a treatment table, they may be asking about an opponent, they may be talking about, can you look at my stats from the last week's game? And somewhere along the line, in a very, I'll say, flippant way, they give information or give a little bit of feedback to the player that actually hits the right note. And that's hugely important too, that those people know their purpose in the team, but that also say that they're very important in the minding of the players and the development of the players, but they mustn't overstep their duties as well. And sometimes these can be great for feedback. Sometimes those guys can give a little bit of feedback to other members of the group, maybe a senior backroom team member, say, look, I'm after finding this out about somebody, and it's a bit like, the training session. I love going to a training session early, have it all set up, and then watch how players arrive at training, the manner they arrive, their dress code, Are they running out of the car and after leaving their boots behind? Are they taking fluid and food on board as they arrive, so they're preparing? Do they have their notebook under their arm? Are they running late again? So like those aspects where you stand back and look how a player arrives at training, how he prepares himself, how he comes on the pitch, and then how he goes off the pitch as well. It's hugely important, and those management team and backroom team can help an awful lot in that too.
Say with Dublin, like there's a lot that kind of all kind of bites into culture and like with the successful organisation, whether it's football or work or anything or family, like the culture is really important. And like what you're saying there, where the people who have the smaller roles in the backroom team can give feedback and everyone kind of has their part to play and it all fits in. Is that something that you try to organise or discuss and kind of happen? Because you kind of bring players into that as well. Like I know, like with some of the players there on the Dublin team, like they're really strong personalities, and again, some managements mightn't. Like if you think of someone like Johnny Cooper, like he's such a leader, like and to the stage where he'll stop a training session himself and give input and draw the players in together. Where some management teams don't like that. More traditional might reject that and they want to have control. Like, is that something where you had conversations about how you wanted the culture to be and what how you wanted it to be player led and all of these kind of things, or is it something that just the type of personalities that you meshed together and that just came?
No, well, you say Johnny is a very, very special guy, but that what Johnny does off the pitch is what he does on the pitch. Like, he's a very organised guy, he's very intelligent, very articulate, his preparation is second to none, so if he has something to say, it tends to be important to what's going on, but how he says it and when he says it is just important. So you might have a guy who is just, this guy is really tuned in, but he interacts with or he interjects just at the wrong time. So he may not be the right person. And it's like a lot of things, like, if you're giving an employee feedback on something, he's after having a really bad day, bad sales for the last week, maybe that's not the right time to say it to him. So how you say it and when you say it, maybe when you say it is as important. It's like, you tell your team, I don't want to hear any cursing now, you effing and blinded and all this carry on, because it doesn't get you anywhere. But like give me the ball, like I really want the ball because I think I can do something with it, sounds better than why the F didn't you effing, So when it goes then back to feedback and player involvement, I think those guys and we talked about the Dublin group, and it's changed so much from the time I played. Very few of us were third level educated guys. We all were, say manual workers, firemen, guards, prison officers. We played a certain way, we were coached a certain way, we were involved in the feedback in a certain way, but now this has evolved so much that players are looking far and wide at how other teams, other sports, and normally the best in their sports and the best in what they do, they're learning from them. So, when you have someone like a Johnny Cooper, it's important that you take on board what he has to say, but he will say it when, probably at the best time. You have other guys who don't get the right time to say it and mightn't put it across in the right way. So, but it's important that you don't just shut people down,
With if you, like, when you're kind of looking at the psychological side of things, you've got like culture, and you also kind of got just general mindset. And like with Dublin and the team that you were involved in, there was so much pressure, external pressure, with seeing you trying to win 5 in a row, trying to win 6 in a row, and yeah, just general pressure in terms of like the media, and there's all of these kind of things you're trying to balance. Like how as a management team did you try and, because it seemed in interviews and stuff like that it was, it never really phased the group, and like I suppose working in media at the time, there was kind of a feeling. I remember at first when I was younger thinking like, I kind of almost used to think I used to be a bit mad at listening to Jim doing interviews, thinking like, come on, you responsibility to give more to media. But then I realised that as I got older and looked more into these high performance, that that's the messages that he's actually given. Like that is the clarity that he's given, and he's actually given it to the media as well. It's just that we couldn't process it.
Yeah. Again, like Jim, again, a very intelligent man. He's fantastic as a coach, but like, let's not forget how great a guy he is off the pitch and the work he's done. As a pilot in the Air Corps and moving on to the IAA. He's not there for because of a fluke. What is important? What's important is within the group. What's important is what you're doing within the group, and it would be the fact that we're the control. You hear all these words. We're in control of our destiny and what we want to do, and that's all that really matters. And if there's an obligation to do a press conference, there's an obligation to do a photo shoot or something like that, you be polite and respectful to those that are in front of you or around you, whether they have notepad and pen or little microphones or cameras. You be polite and respectful to them. They have to do a job, so you give them enough information. And as you said, when you look back on some of the quotes or some of the sayings or some of the reports, it actually was giving you enough information. It's not the sensationalism, but it was enough to be respectful to the people that are around you. That was coming from the group, So I think that's why it's so well managed. And some managers nowadays just don't do that well, and it's not down to he's media trained or anything like that. It's just that's the type of person that he is. Like I'm sure it's difficult for the likes of say Colin O'Rourke, to go from media commentary, TV to go into a management role and then be faced up by the media and how he responds, or what's the best way to respond to questions of him, so it's like Kevin McStay, the same thing, he's gone from the coaching or from the media into coaching, and now it's just targeted.
A lot of that sensationalism though is like kind of, I think there's a GA audience now, or GA people kind of a bit tired of it. They kind of want more insight and want to know more, of like reasons for, or just kind of to see behaviours and to have answers. And like a lot of the stuff that Jim would say about kind of focusing on like what was in front of us, and like if you read into that, Rory McIlroy talks the same way. Like it's like you can actually take so much from that. Like and was that, like, say when you had your team meetings and you had your group discussions, like was the conversation very much like, was it that structured and that, where was your goals and your plans that, straight? Because that's how it seemed. Like it seemed like he knew exactly what he wanted. There were no distractions. It was just pure clarity. Like,
yeah, what I would say to you is like there is clarity on what's going on. If something had to be revisited, it was revisited. To be sure that everybody within the group knew their role and knew the job. But as you know yourself, that's as much as you can bring to it. But when an opponent decides to set up a certain way, or they don't start at 15, so all of a sudden it can change, and it changes and evolves during the game. But again, if the players are aware that they have the strength and the power, the ability to adapt and make change on the pitch, that it's not so rigid as you might say or think, that the players are that good. And let's be honest, it's possibly the best group of footballers ever to come together. And is it by fluke? Well, they were born when they were born, and they matured when they matured. Yes, they got great guidance from the structures coming through Dublin County Board, if we're talking about Dublin, and coming up to that stage. And during those 10 years in their lifetime, they were together. You were very, very fortunate and very, very lucky that it happened. And then they took every opportunity that was at their disposal. So when we're going back to playing a match, you have a structure, there's a plan, this is what we're going to do. If an opponent does something, well then you're capable of changing it. Management team between Jason and Declan and Jim, who would call most of the plays. If the players weren't able to adapt, and most of the time they're able to, but then a change could be made. It may have been preempted that, well, look, we think a certain team is going to bring on a certain player, or they're going to go to a certain shape. Well, then you try and have something to counteract that. But you will stick with the players on the pitch first to see how they adapt. If not, then you can make the changes that's needed.
Yeah, and again, that comes back to what you were saying before in terms of the culture and the sense of, like, the players, you had the trust in the players, and the players then developed that in themselves. Just going into like what you were saying about the O'Byrne Cup, and kind of being involved with that O'Byrne Cup, and then that first year, and then the subsequent years, and then being involved with Jim and with Desi, like traditionally, I think even playing county minor, county under 21, still there's trials, and traditionally with county seniors there used to be trials, and it's become very difficult now to maintain that with county senior teams. A lot of county senior teams don't have like specific trials. They might have a trial game where they could bring in 5 or 6 at different times. But one of the things that I did realise since coming up here and being involved with clubs is that there are a lot of in-house games. Like there's a lot of in-house games and a lot of players being brought in for them. Like, give us a kind of a bit of an insight into, from being involved like between O'Byrne Cup and those in-house games, and any games that you were looking at. Like, how big was your kind of radar, and how important, and why was that so important?
Yeah. Well, say from the earlier days, and I know it's even changed up a huge amount since Desi's got involved, and having a development squad as such. When your top 40 players, have been fortunate enough to win an All-Ireland, and you get the reward of like a team holiday, team trip. There are some very, very good club footballers being are left behind in Ireland that weren't involved in the county setup, and it's important that they get some sort of reward, and the reward is wearing a Dublin jersey. But it's important as a management team. I was so lucky that Jim Brogan, who had coached me, we were able to work together really well with that group of players. We were able to hold on to, say, some of the kit men who didn't go on the holiday, or 1 or 2 of the statisticians. They were available, so you had a winning culture already with you, and then you were going to see players in a dressing room that they knew each other well. Some of them had played minor, some of them had played under 21 but never made it into the senior setup. Maybe they were just too young at the time to make the step up, to give them an opportunity to go and wear the Dublin jersey. And as I said, there was a bit of freedom about it. I liked that. There was an element of freedom. We couldn't go into kick-out strategies. We couldn't go into set plays. We couldn't talk about, a +1, or we want 2 on the full forward line and 3.5 forward line. We want a full court press on kick-outs. It didn't. Now, we lost games. One of them was against Westmeath in the O'Byrne Cup final. We lost games because we didn't have that. And in hindsight, I was going, God, why didn't I go through a small bit of that? But the O'Byrne Cup was running off very, very quickly. Even we bet Meath in the semi-final that year, and it went to penalties. It was might have been the first game, maybe one other game that week in Connacht had gone to penalties, and like that, 5 fellas stepped up to me and said, "I'll take a penalty," and we won that penalty shootout, and that was one of the most enjoyable evenings for me, But it was great to see like players from Ross Hazley from Sylvester's, who just shone in those O'Byrne Cup games. Great recognition, and he probably carried us in a game down in Newbridge against Kildare, and and some of those players like Niall Scully was in around there, Brian Howard was around there, Emmet O'Conneilla had been away and was getting an opportunity again. It was great to see those develop and push on, but on the flip side, it was very sad that some of those players that I felt were really, really good just didn't take the opportunity. Maybe the opportunity was there for them. They didn't grasp it. They didn't say, well, look, I want a piece of this and I'm going to do everything I can to move up to the next level. So, where you open up this group of 30, maybe 35 players, not everybody's going to get game time, and you would hope that 2, 3, 4 or 5 of them might push on into a league, and maybe only one will go into a championship, you know. But sometimes I'm more disappointed for the ones we lost than the ones we gained, because you know there were some really, really good players out there.
Bringing it even a step back beyond that, when you go to watch a club game, or like when you are watching those Burn Cup games, but say watching a club game, what are the things that you're looking for that Jim would say, you know, we're looking at this guy because of this? Like, was it a case of you were looking very much for players who fit into the way that you played, or were you very much open-minded looking at the games? Because it is a case of, like, as you said, like the game is changing and there's systems and stuff, so you're trying to get someone who fits in. Like, I think when Brian Fenton came through, you were just like, wow, like is he just made for this team? Like he's such a good footballer, but he never makes a mistake. Like, he keeps the ball, he uses the kick, but like he was just perfect for the way that Dublin played, where you could bring a really good player in who mightn't just click. Like, so was that kind of what you were aware of when you were watching those games?
No, I think when you go to watch a game, you go with a very open mind. You know, you might be going to watch 2 or 3 players that you've heard are in really good form. You might have got reports back, whether, you know, you read the newspaper, that even Herald, wherever someone says, oh, this fella played really well, scored 5 points. So you might be going looking at it. Then it's easy to check back. Was he on a development squad? Was he on a under 20 squad or a minor squad before? No, he hasn't. He's come out of nowhere. So really, you're just watching behaviour and standards, really, you know, because you don't know what way their team are what their game plan is, and you don't know whether he's fitting into the game plan because you don't know what the game plan is. So you're just looking at a skill set. You're looking, can he catch? Can he kick? Can he solo? Can he tackle? Does he have a you know, really good discipline? Is he complementary to his teammates? Is he encouraging? You know, when he sees an opportunity arising, does he take it, or does he give it a player in the best position? So things like that, that's what you're looking at, you know. So it's not about how he sets up in a certain line or what he actually does. It's the skills of the game.
Even in saying that, though, in terms of like kind of seeing reports and like it is challenging. Like in other sports, we don't have, like, there's such a net of players, like in Dublin especially, like there's so many players that, like, it's very hard to have a grasp on everyone and how everyone is doing. So that's what I mean. Like, in terms of, like, would you be going to club matches regularly and kind of having a check on, like having kind of a record on how loads of players are getting on, and having, I know that you said there's development squads there now, or guys who were in before, you're constantly monitoring players, which is really hard.
Yeah, well, see, the thing about it as well, like if you go to a game and you're looking at a game and you don't know who somebody is, and you happen that he's easy on the eye, looks like there's something about him, you have to go and ask somebody. And then if you go and ask somebody, say, oh, so-and-so was asking about him, and then it builds up, you know, either a pressure on the player because a word gets back, or else a word break of, this fella's the new up and coming thing. And you don't want to do that, you know, because that's not how you do it. Sometimes you might, like, through playing and management, you have a large portfolio of numbers in there that I could make a call and say, listen, I was out watching your club side. What's this guy like, or what do you think of him? Like, I don't mind saying it, that with 1 or 2 of the O'Byrne Cup teams, and I got a phone call from an ex-inter-county player from another county who was involved in a Dublin club and told me about Tom Lahiff. This guy has been, you know, like, player of the year for us, and he's lots of talent and he's lots of skills. I think maybe he's worth a look at, you know. So people give you a call, you know, and again, if their name is in your phone, it's more than likely, you trust them, you know, for what they're doing, you know, and I did that time, you know, and like, I didn't find Tom Lahiff. Tom Lahiff came forward and played really well with his club, and word was that he was playing well and has developed into a really, really good footballer, you know.
With the likes of Tom Hiffs or Niall Scully with the earlier O'Byrne Cup teams, we said Howard, Fenton kind of came in and was playing a lot of league games. Like, what do you think it is with those players that make them settle in? Because there are some players who've struggled, like who've been sensational in club winning teams, and they haven't kind of clicked in or made the, been a consistent starter or consistent, coming on and starting games for Dublin. Like, what is it do you think that makes the players, and what's the advice that you give to a guy when he comes in, he's been burning for his club and he's training, because there's a different type of pressure on them.
Yeah, the answer to that is huge, because the difference between a good inter-county footballer and a good club footballer is a huge gap, and it's very hard to fill in all those details in that. When you spot a player and you think, look, he's worth a look at, and bring him in a couple of training sessions. As I said to you before, how he arrives at training, the manner he comes into training, how he goes out on the training pitch. Is he listening? Is he getting involved? Is he to the fore or is he to the back? Is he too verbal? Is he too quiet? After training, has he gone to somebody to speak to them about how his performance was, how to improve? Does he stick around after training for a meal, or is he a takeaway? Does he fill in a takeaway? So all those items are only a small amount of the things between the good club footballer and the county footballer. So you look at that. It's like in the job I'm in now, we brought in some new recruits lately, and you advise them to say, when you're walking through the corridors and work, don't just walk by and introduce yourself to colleagues, because these are going to be the colleagues you're going to be working with for the next 10, 15 or 20 years. And in the job that I'm in, it can be a life or death situation, because we're in the aviation industry, we're firefighters. If something happens, you gotta have your teammate beside you. You gotta know who you are. They gotta know who you are too. And then, it's important that you come in and don't think you're bigger or better than anybody else, because you're part of that team environment. So when a guy comes in, and again, I've been involved in teams and dressing rooms when I've asked someone, look, to go through a certain routine, go through a certain practice on freeze or a kick-out strategy, and his answer was, I have this sorted, this is not an issue. And straight away I went, I really hope this doesn't come back and, bite you in the ass, because that to me was the wrong mindset and frame of mind to have.
I remember Brian Fenton in an interview, I think he mentioned Kieran Kilkenny saying to him when he first came into the squad about keeping everything simple and kind of building confidence as he came on. The thing I actually love most about Fenton is how that he loads of players, when they get county opportunity, that you're obviously going to improve as a player, but he really has improved and improved and improved and improved, and it's such a good sign of a player. But when you have a guy in, how do you strike that balance? I know it's obviously different as a manager looking, but if you were advising somebody you knew coming in, how do you strike the balance between taking chances and going for it, and then also you don't want to make mistakes? I know that's a balance you have to strike in every game, but particularly when you're on that, I suppose, trial basis, it's really challenging.
Yeah, well, like you say about Brian doing things simple, he's just got better at doing the things simple. He hasn't over elaborated. He's always been a good fielder, he's always been a good carrier of the ball. Maybe he's improved in his shooting. Now he can shoot both left and right, and he gets himself into better positions. He may have been a type of player. Again, as a pass midfielder, I would look at the pitch from goal to goal, and then most pitches nowadays have nets behind, and then you have the two big poles holding those nets up. And I don't want a midfielder, particularly of Brian Fenton's quality, and I think Kieran Whelan as well, and they're both clubmen, Rahili clubmen, that if Kieran Whelan or Brian Fenton or any midfielder is outside the width of those poles, those big wooden poles behind the goals, well, I think they're wasting their time. Whereas if they're inside there, they can do more damage if they're going to make a burst through to take a score. But they're also great for their own team on a defensive issue. So if one of these players gets pulled left or right, there tends to be no one else to fill the gap as well as they do, because of stature, because of their size, because of their athleticism. So, you know, the ways like that of improvement are so simple. And, you know, when a player does make a mistake, and whether it was, a risky shot or he shouldn't take that, what he does next, what you observe him to do next. Like, does he win the next kick out? Does he sit back and say, well, look, I'm not going to press here? And all of a sudden, 5 or 6 or 7 other players in the team that are pressing up, he doesn't add into that. Well, then he hasn't made the right decision. So his mind isn't clear based on maybe what he's just done beforehand, you know. And, you know, at the time when he take the shot, was there someone in a better position at half time or after the game? If he can say, look, I took a shot and afterwards there was someone in a better position, I should have really seen that. So how someone responds there, then, in those minutes or seconds after a mistake is crucial. And then how he responds post-game, and then how he responds in the next game. Does he do the same thing again? It's hugely important, you know.
Yeah. So the response is a big thing that you're looking
for. And this, in the few seconds afterwards, and the few minutes afterwards, at half time, after a game, and then in the few days after a game.
Yeah. So when players, and you saying even with Brian, doing the simple things but just doing them better, like the kind of that idea of having to think that you have to do everything in those trial matches. You don't really need to be doing everything. You need to do the simple things well, and if you do make a mistake, you respond. So they're kind of two big learnings to.
It's very important.
Yeah. I think one of the things you're saying there, and a lot of the things you kind of notice, and even earlier when you were talking about you were talking position in there, or earlier when you were talking about, you know, just you honing in on a player doing a specific thing in a game. Like, so obviously in the setup in Dublin, you were watching everything, and so that means you would have noticed, I suppose, a lot of like honesty and things like that shown, and then in the selections of types of players that you picked, you know, you had your Dennis Basticks and your Darren Dailies, as well as you had your McConnellys and your, you know, Kieran Kilkennys. You had a really nice balance of players, and everyone kind of brought something to the team. Like, tell us about how important that is to find that balance, because I think that was one of the strengths of that Dublin team, is that if you wanted to go physical with them, they'll go physical with you. If you wanted to go running game, they'll go running with you. If you want to play football with them, they'll play like they could go in any way. Where if you were to get a pen and paper and pick your 15 best players, even watching the Dublin Club Championship, there'd probably be some lads who weren't even on the squad, you know. So how important is that as a coach and a manager to find that balance, and then to notice the little things that guys are doing?
Well, you know, okay, the Dublin structure is, as I said to you, is a bit of a fluke, maybe the way that generation of players came along, and you know, you've mentioned the Darren Dailies and Dennis Bastick. Dennis Bastick was in around the pillar time, you know, as well, and you know, and probably didn't get great credit during that time. Probably was set back and knocked back a bit, but then Pat Gilroy brought him in, and Jim, and look the type of player that he turned out to be, like a warrior and a warhorse, and always a great athlete, you know, and that's just someone that you needed and you wanted, and then you had a Darren Daly who never started in any of the All-Ireland finals. I don't know how many All-Ireland medals he has. He never started, but he's come in and contributed, and actually probably won us 2 All-Irelands based on the skills that he was really good at. He was a great defender, he was a great reader of the game, he was a great assessor of his opponents, he was a great, you know, it's important that you have players on the sideline that can come in and do a job, but can they go in and advise or bring on a message to the team as well? That's something, you know, as a coach that I'd always look at. That, look, you look behind you, we need to make a change here, well, we need to get someone on with a message, and can that person bring on a message? And I would say it to teams when I'm coaching teams, that and I'm watching what's going on. So if I say, look, I need you to go in there, but will you tell the guys we want to go 4 and a half back line and push on somebody else, you know? And I'd be watching for the next couple of minutes to see that it happen. And then if it didn't happen, well, then I want to know why that guy. But I'm after scoring 3 points. You brought me in the sub, I said, I know, but that's what I expect of you. But I also expected to do something else, was to bring on a message. and if he's clear in mind and clear in head. And that's where, at the heat of any battle, any player can get flustered. How far he comes out of his zone, it's down to himself or his direct opponent knowing that he's actually getting a little bit worried here, and then the direct opponent will try and actually knock you for 6, and that you're not part of what's going on. You just become oblivious to it. You think everything is coming on top of you. So, when you have a team of players, be it club or county, and they can stay in the moment, they can understand what's going on, they can listen to instructions, they can take on board what subs are bringing on, or what's deemed to be the right decision by someone on the team who is playing well or is in the moment. That's as important as anything else, So it's a skill that you have to look for, a skill you have to have, a skill you have to acquire.
Well, I suppose the thing with Bastic, I even saying, like, kind of saying, you have your Dennis Bastics and Darren Davies, and then you have your McConnellys, and like, it's almost like, it seems almost disrespectful to those guys, but that's just the way that, even when you talk about club reports, before Dennis Bastick was in the Dublin team, I doubt very much that he was getting the plaudits in the Evening Herald reports, because they're probably giving it to the guy who scored 6 points, where the work that he was doing, he obviously spotted that, and then he came in and he did it, and he was able to do it at county level, and he was able to do it against the best players, and he was one of the best players in the country at what he did. And like, that's again, like that, and that's what, like, even you have your John Smalls and your Brian Howards, and they develop, but like, they all brought something different. And like, I always think with that Dublin team, there were times where some really top, like, all-stars were on the bench, and if you just rejigged the team around a bit, and you took one of those lesser big names in, and you could fit all the big names in, but you never did that. And that's why kind of your insight into that, you always look to find kind of a balance to the team.
Well, a lot of managers now talk about is your finishing, like what your finishing 15 is your most important. They're the ones that do get you across the line, but they have to appreciate and how fortunate they are, because they're on the bench. There's still another 5 or 6 guys who could be all-stars, are in the stand somewhere, or they've been left behind in the team hotel. So it is trying to keep everybody happy. It is trying to. I don't mean that in a flippant way. It's about players understanding what their role is and how important it is, and how important they are. To that, like, I was a big fan of Bernard Brogan, because again he was floating around in the time with Pillar's time with himself and Alan, but he turned into a phenomenal scoring forward after that, one like a remarkable scoring record, and it was so important to Dublin. So I felt I had a little bit of, not say loyalty to him, but certainly I love to have him around the training pitch and around the dressing room. And only recently he's mentioned the difficulties that he had when he was injured, and James Allen, the physio, was looking after him, and how James personally one-on-one at running tracks and on bikes and in swimming pools was looking after him, and I thought that was so true, and it's so relevant of James. That's what he would do. But Bernard, just, there was something about him when he was in the dressing room. There was something about him in the team hotel, and you knew on the bench as well. Like, you don't need bench jumpers. You don't need someone on the bench who's absolutely losing it within himself watching the game going on, but he's able to converse and talk. A bit like a Darren Daly on the bench. You knew that he was spotting something, and he wasn't keeping it to himself. He was shared it amongst the group, and the guys were discussing this. And that again, that's what I when I'm managing a team, or I'm in charge of a team, or when I was in charge of a team, that if you're having subs warming up, I hate to see subs going 70 yards down the sideline, because if I say I need him now, he should be within a short distance of me if I need to get something that's in my head I've just noticed. Or else I could ask him almost immediately, did you see that happening there? Yes, I did. Well, okay, you're the man to go in and try and do something about that. So, the importance of having the right people starting the game, the right people to come in and change the game, the right people to come in and finish off what's being done, the right people, if you're watching your opponent, who they may have in the subs, and if they have a certain player that you know is going to be a threat, do we have someone to mark him? Or if you feel that your opponent has a weakness in backup full backs, well, we've got someone to go in at full forward and just might just rattle these so much that will finish it, you know. So to have your equipment spread out in certain areas to go to battle is hugely important, and you know where it is, they know where they're at and why they're there, and then when they get onto the pitch and are forced to do that, they know what they have to do.
With that Dublin team, like I know you worked a lot on the skill development with them. Like if you look at country teams that are looking at Dublin, and they all think that Dublin are, you know, running like crazy, and that they're doing that, which they obviously physically there's a lot of work that's being put in there. But like the skill development of that team is what kind of separated them from the other teams. And like, give us a bit of an idea in terms of like training sessions and like how much focus you actually put on skills, because I think it's just really important a message to get across in the GA, because like teams are training themselves into the ground with them things where the skills are so important and developing skills. So like how often would you train, you know, skill development, and when would you do it? Would you do it before the session, in the session, both? Like what would that look like?
Again, look, if you're in charge of any team, you need to know what players you have, and you put in your management team then after that, you know, selectors that you know you can trust, who have a similar eye to yourself, have an opinion, and know when everybody contributes. You then, if you're in a club side, what is their medical structure? Do you have a physio? Do you have a doctor? Do they go to games? Do they go to training? So you put things in place like that. Hugely important. When it comes to skills, what's important is that I feel always that it should be player led. If a guy is a defender, he should know how to tackle. He should know how to practice tackling. He should know how to work with another defender, maybe, to work on his tackling. He then can go to a forward and say, look, I need you to run at me with the ball, and I want to work on my tackling. He gets different players of different statures, left foot, right foot, speed, power, and he just works and hones down the skills. Now, at club level, you might know so much about your next game and your next opponent. At county level, you can look at your opponent. Who's your next opponent? What's their team makeup like? What's their subs like? Who possibly will start? And you might be able to focus more on your direct opponent, and I want to work on my defensive skills this week at that element. As a forward, you have the same thing. You know, you might at club level be able to look at who you're playing next week, and then maybe trawl back through newspapers or social media and say, well, look, this team give away no goals. You know, they've conceded no goals in the last 6 matches, and they've won their matches. And maybe say, look, we need to work goals into this game to make sure, because I think if they concede goals, they're going to beat them. So there's small things you can do at club level. At county level, again, you can find everything, and everything is on video, everything is on RTE, or it's recorded. So you can find out those minute details. So the way I look at it as a manager, I come in, I set training up, I go out and watch my players arrive, and then I'll watch and see what they do. I absolutely hate this idea of having 20 footballs out on the pitch, the same 3 players in at the goal, and then 20 players kicking the ball over and waiting for the ball to be kicked back out. I absolutely detest it. The 20 footballs are there. You should have a ball each, or a ball between 2, and start working on your skills. Defenders work on your defending, midfielders work on your catching, and forwards work on their shooting. And a forward should work with a forward, put the ball over the bar, take 5, switch around. Myself and Mick Galvin used to have a routine that we would go to training, and during the month of May we would work, okay, you have to get 20 shots in training tonight. June, it's 30. July, it's 4. So each month we would improve the quantity, we would increase the quantity and try and improve the quality. And that's what I want if I'm with a club side. I want to see guys take it upon themselves to practice those skills, because then when you go into a small-sided games or a match situation, you know where they're at. You know the work that they've put in should come back bucket loads in those situations, you know.
So like a good kind of example of what you're looking for. You want a player to be turning up with the right mindset, the right attitude, the right body language, and then to be out practicing beforehand. Like, so you'd have drills set up well in advance of training, the start time, and you want the players out. Like,
you don't need to. If there's a football, that's the only tool you need. Okay, there are times where you can work on defensive duties and without a football. I want you to run at me so I can work on my hands and my feet. Get my hands and feet in the right position. That if you're running at me, and how I can stop you. You know, so the ball is not required. Same way with shooting. Shooting, okay, is putting it between the posts, but the strike is important as anything else. So I would again encourage players. Most pitches nowadays have a big net behind the goal, to actually get a ball in their hand and strike 4, 5, 6, maybe 10 shots, nice and easy, into that net from 5 yards out, and just get that feel of the strike, that I'm actually striking the ball really well. The chances are, like a good golf shot, if you're striking that ball well, you won't feel a thing. If you shank one and you catch one off the toe, you're going to feel it in the club and it's going to go where it's going to go. So to be able to go out and practice that the strike, I know what it feels like. Now I'm going to work on, 15, 20 yards out, work on the strike between the posts. And now want to go into my shooting range. So if the coach says to me, 10 shots from there, how many out of 10 can you give me? Well, I can give you 8 out of 10. Well, that's not bad. I'll be happy.
Yeah. I suppose without giving away state secrets or anything, just to give like an eagle view of walking into looking at a Dublin team in, when you were involved a couple of years ago before training, is that what you're going to see? Maybe at 45 minutes before training, you're going to see players scattered all over the pitch working on their skills.
Yeah, that's it. Like,
that's everything.
That's it. Like, obviously there's players need some time with physios and doctors, and they might want to do a little bit of homework, the video analysis, or get their notes right, or things like that, or they might go to one of the coaches and say, listen, can you come out and have a look at this? I want to work on something, So, if you're unsure, you need that little bit of guidance, and if you're unsure, you go to your manager or your coach and say, listen, what do you think I need to work on? It's either based on what has happened in a previous game or what you think I'm going to be facing coming up. And it doesn't, like what Dublin did is not rocket science. It is what you'd like to see at any club level, except the standards were very, very high. You don't become good at playing the sport unless you set very high standards, and the players set high standards. They demand high standards of themselves. They demand high standards of each other. They give each other feedback. They're the practice dummy for anything that you need to do, and that's the way it should be with any club level. The players have ownership. Like I always say, as a coach or a manager, I'd love not to be required. Like, I think sometimes managers can ruin the game for players. When I look at young teams nowadays, and you go up and you watch them at any level, and that's probably in soccer as well, and probably a little bit in rugby. The amount of involvement from the sideline during the game is just way too much. I think they need to be able to express themselves. So to be not required on match day, or not required at all, it means the players are leading it.
Yeah. It's giving a respect to that kind of things, though, isn't it? Like a respect to the player to express themselves and a trust, and like as you said, it's not rocket science, but like giving a respect to the skills, because I think there's a big difference between training and practice. Like training sessions are like team collective drills, it's match specific, it's tactics, where the actual thing of practicing, your shooting or practicing one-on-ones and stuff like that. Like I find, sometimes if you're not there to train early, like when the off season is there and you can always get a guy to come and do some one-on-ones, I feel like the growth that I get there sometimes, you lose that during the season unless you can get that as well. The two are completely separate, So if you can come early and get that practice and then get your training, but a lot of other teams are kind of focusing on the physical side, I think, a bit too much.
It comes back to who your strength and conditioning coach is as well. Dublin are extremely lucky to have Brian Cullen front and centre with that. You know, ex-player, you know, has done it all, has captained Dublin. So he's gone off and learned greater skills with Leinster Rugby, and he's come back to Dublin, and he's Dublin through and through, and he has a love for it, but he also has a love for his trade and his skill, and we're very fortunate. All the players trust and respect him. The managers never underestimate him. They fully know his value, getting the players in the right condition, and then he obviously works through with the physios and doctors for the prevention. Like, again, too many times managers, and I'm always talking about, this is club teams as well, managers don't rely enough on the feedback they have from their doctors and physios. Like, ultimately, you want to have the best. You want to have a squad of players for any match, whether it's league or championship. You want them in the best physical condition to do the job, and that's simple as, if you have 3 hamstring injuries, there's an issue there. You need to talk to someone, if there's someone doing strength and conditioning, or if you're in charge of your running set for the last 2 weeks, something's gone wrong, and you need to talk with your physios then to say, well, look, we repaired these hamstrings and we think it's because of this. So the feedback you get from them is important. So their involvement in the whole training plan is huge, because an injured team or an unfit team ain't going to win anything for you, you know. And that's where, going back to the very start of the conversation, a manager that knows to delegate the jobs, trusts everybody in it, when requires their feedback, when needs their feedback, when they give their feedback, it's all taken on board. So this package then is at its best when it's required.
I suppose, like, when you're talking about the skill sets, you know, there's the tackling and the shooting and all of these things that you have a lot of knowledge on, but we're not gonna we'll be here all day for you to go through all of them. But I know that you love, and when you played yourself, you were an excellent fielder of the ball. So you kind of give us a bit of an insight, say, people who are watching and listening, about like the core skills of fielding and how you would advise a young player or player to get better at catching the ball. Like what would you, if you could go out and, you know, you had 40 minutes to go out with a guy and you're going to improve him early and his fielding, like what would you do, or what would a session look like?
First of all, you're not going to go off and kick balls from 50 yards and see how he does it, because like to do that takes a lot of time. So starting off, you really want to see how a guy reacts to a ball coming into his hands, whether you're skidding the ball off the ground into his hands, whether you're throwing it straight at him, whether you're punt past it into him from a very short distance. So all of a sudden you have 20 or 30 catches, you know, using his hands to see actually how his hands are. Then you have to look at the biomechanics of it. How does he actually run and jump? You know, is he a straight leg jumper? Like there's a lot of photographs where you see a player and he's straight legged catching the ball high overhead. Is that his technique, or was it pure fluke that he got underneath the ball and he had to reach so high? Like, you'd wonder, why was he not attacking and jumping into the ball? So you like to see the skill of the player taking that 1-2 and jump. And when you do that, there's nobody around you. Like you don't have anybody around you. I know the Aussie rules introduced then the tackle bag, that you can run and jump and get yourself up onto that tackle bag. That's all well and good, but ultimately you getting to where you want to go at its highest point is about you and nobody else. Like, you can practice further down the field with your own goalkeeper, as in the flight of the ball that he has, the way he likes to strike it. Does he have a favourite place? And what you'd say to him is, like, excuse me, if the shit hit the fan and we needed to win a ball at midfield, where is the best place for you to kick the ball? Tell me where you will put it, and I'll find myself there and I'll catch it. So that's usually important too. But the biomechanics, how he jumps. Then you can add on a little bit of a challenge, like while he's jumping, being able to throw maybe a tennis ball at him or another football to try and distract him. I love the flotation, the spaghetti, you know, those flotation devices from the swimming pool. You see it in rugby. So as a fella's jumping and he gets a clip of one of those under his chin, does he like it or not like it? Because more likely he's going in a match, he's going to get something. I watch other sports. You watch rugby league or rugby union, they practice like that. You know, Hugo Keenan, you know, doesn't become a great fielder for a ball, just pump it up there, Johnny, and I'll catch it, or someone else. You know, he's going to be put under pressure at some stage. But if you can catch it and jump in the first place, there's no point introducing the pressure then after that, you know?
Yeah.
So that's the phases. How the hands are, practice, practice, practice. How is biomechanics, putting maybe a small little hurdle on the ground. You know, so I want you to jump over that, I want you to jump over that without a ball and see how you do. Now I'm going to throw a ball up and I want you to jump. So again, you're just there throwing the ball. You're not kicking it or lumping it, because you need a keeper to do that. And that's how I would, start the basics of it.
I remember in DCU, I was playing in the backs, but I played most of my football midfield, and I remember being jealous of you working with midfielders, and you had it. I think there was a rope or something around the pitch anyway, and you had them jumping over it. And they were doing a session kind of. I couldn't fully see exactly what it was they were doing, but I knew it was involved with the rope. But yeah, because I know I would catch a ball, I have a stretch more than a jump, but it's something that I haven't really worked on a lot, and when I practice kicking and catching, I'm working on the hand and I'm reinforcing the strengths rather than and I don't think we spend enough time breaking down a skill and working on it as specifically as you said there. You know, sometimes maybe we do for kicking because that's the obvious one, but for everything I don't think we do enough of that.
It goes back to my I loved to jump. I think it was a strength of mine was a jump that I had and eyeing the ball and when you're playing a game, you put in a good block, there's really, and you get down on a boot and get a block, and if you can hit the opponent at the same time, maybe give him a dunk and a bit of damage, but you've got the ball. If you make that near hand tackle and it's good, or you break a ball away as a defender, as a forward, get that strike and it sails between the posts exactly where he likes. That's that feeling that you have, that emotion that you have. But to me, to be head and shoulders above someone, making that catch. Now, the game has slightly changed since I played, it was play on. You could land and you could get thumped by it. But nowadays you take your mark and so be it. But I think even with the mark nowadays, it's a great statement early on in the game. It's a kick out to be won, that you go and win it. And if you want to stop when the whole world is free up the pitch, but if you want to stop and eyeball your direct opponent or whatever and say, listen, my eye is in today and I'm doing it, so be it. I don't think there's a better feeling than feeling about it. I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm saying, to be honest, I'd take it before scoring any day. But on the kind of last question I wanted to ask you was, so when you're talking about skill set, and obviously Dublin, you built your game around that, but I suppose talking about football in general, and if you look at Jim when he first came in, and he built a team that was the best team in the country and was capable of beating any team by double digits, but then obviously Jim McGuinness came and found a way of beating that team, and then Dublin started developing ways to make sure that they would win games, and to be, that kind of ultra controlled way of playing is kind of one of the big hallmarks of that team, which, when you have successful teams all over the country pick up from it. And do you I think now, from being involved in Dublin teams, that I'm seeing that there's teams are kind of almost gone too far into that kind of controlled way of playing without realising that at the root of Dublin's success was skill set and performance, and then they added those things. And I'm looking at Dublin teams now, and obviously you've still got a lot of the senior team are young, but a lot of the club football I'm seeing right now is just the basic skill set is kind of being a bit neglected, and also the kind of the simple flow of football in terms of how you get from A to B to score is kind of being a bit forgotten. Because if you were to say to I feel like if you were to say to a 17-year-old in Dublin or an 18-year-old, how does football look like? They'd be like, well, you come out and then you cross, and then you come up and then you cross. As opposed to, you do that if you're faced with a defence, but at the end of the day, you want to come out, pop, cross over and shoot. That's how it looks like. And I don't know, like, you're obviously more involved in football in Dublin. I'm not talking about the senior team now, but do you think that's something that's a bit of a worry, that people are forgetting what actually that team did stand for, and they're getting too caught up on the other side of things?
Yeah, like, you mentioned the Donegal. Well, like, Donegal were a certain group. Again, it's a certain group of players or a certain group of time that their manager had them playing and understanding a certain style of play. And the longevity of that was not so long. It was there for a certain period of time, and in that particular season, that worked for them, and they got their All-Ireland success, beating Dublin. Dublin were evolving under Jim only at that stage, probably because Pat had moved on, and Jim was moving in, and he had those guys the few years earlier at the underage thing. So he was back in, playing the football that he understood, and what he knew the players understood. Like, it is a thing. Again, you go looking at soccer academies around Europe, and you look at how it's done in particularly in Holland and Ajax and Feyenoord. All these players know and understand and can speak a good game because they do understand it. Sometimes nowadays at club level, at underage in particular, they're forced into the opinions and views of their club managers, rather than the club manager understand them. Look, this is the type of player, this is the type of team I can put together, and I need to coach them their way rather than my way. I need to coach them based on the skills that we have in this team. Like, I want to play a really defensive type of game, but I've 3 unbelievable forwards. You can't carry 3 unbelievable forwards. You might get away with 1 unbelievable forward who stays up there all the time as a 1-on-1 or a 2-on-1. I know will do damage, but the other forwards have to come back and defend, and don't feel comfortable doing that. So then, if they're not comfortable, your game plan isn't going to work. So I think it's important that the managers manage teams the best way that they understand and know what's best for their team. So it's important that both of them sort of gel together,
Yeah.
And maybe maybe people nowadays are watching too much football. Maybe they're watching too much telly, and going and watching games and seeing these lines of defence. We're being counter thing. I'm not involved in anybody at the moment. I've no love or graw, because from the age of 14 getting into a Dublin development squad to the age of 54 when I finished with Desi and the setup there, that's 40 years. So I think I need a bit of a break to go and enjoy and watch. But if I was involved in a team, I would be trying very hard to go back to a little bit of old school 15 on 15. If you've got six defenders, and it's very hard to find good cornerbacks nowadays. I think cornerbacks aren't made, cornerbacks are born. So if you have 6 defenders, and with a supplement of a midfielder or another forward, they should be able to defend most things and most of the time. So you still have forwards up the pitch. So I would be a 15v15 toe to toe. You might get a few beatings. You mightn't go down so well on the sideline, and mightn't go down so well in the local pub because the way you're playing. But if you believe it, and then maybe the players might enjoy it because they might be able to express themselves that little bit more. That's the way I would be. That's the way I would like to coach nowadays. That's why I'm not a big fan of watching games nowadays for that reason.
I'm similar with it as well, but I think that essentially what you're saying there even is that controlled way of playing, or that was of a benefit to that Dublin team, and so other teams trying to replicate that is pointless unless it's a benefit to their team. And it should be 15 on 15 unless the tactics you adopt are going to make it better for your team, not just for the sake of it. I feel like the starting block for a team, no team would start with 15 for. I'm looking there at some teams like junior clubs and stuff like that, and they're adding complications to themselves. There's 3 men everywhere because they're trying to bring back wing forwards, but they don't know what they're doing really. Where if everyone marked their man, took responsibility for their man, they'd actually be better defensively. It's only if you need to do that defensive system for a particular reason.
So if you have responsibility for a certain man, if that man does damage, it's your responsibility.
Yeah.
Whereas when you have so much free flowing play, and a certain fella scores, well, he wasn't my man because I was in this line of defence that I was told to take. So he went in that line, so that was your responsibility. So people not taking responsibility upsets me a bit, you know.
And I think at club level, especially definitely at underage level, I think players should be able to master them conditions before they start doing anything else. Like, it is a bit worrying when you see under 14 teams with, you know,
again, you to hear underage players, and they're okay. As I said, your cornerbacks is a very special, or fullback is a very special position. Dublin have been so lucky with the fullbacks that we have. They were proper fullbacks they weren't made, but they improved themselves. And obviously there's seriously quality full forwards and corner forwards out there that they needed a little bit of protection. But nowadays, when you hear people shouting, "Where's my +1? Where's the fella in front of me?" Like, who told Mick Lyons or Jerry Hargan or Paddy Morton, you know, or any of these players, you're going to have a +1? They'd have told you, I don't need a +1. I can look after him myself, you know.
Yeah, and like Mick Fitzsimons isn't screaming for a +1 when he's playing for Coola, like, or it's only in certain conditions where that's necessary.
Yeah, you know? It's not. They're not there all the time.
Yeah.
You know, the game is there to get up the pitch and get scores. If you win the game 1-0, it's an attack that's got the score. So that's simple as. But if a team are going to come at you, if you can get a player in just to fill a gap between the delivery of the ball and the full back line, that's a great help, because and the way I look at it is, if a player comes in to protect that full back line, while the opponent is now setting up and saying, well, look, I can't get the ball in there because there's a fella in the way, one of your team should be closing him down. You've stopped him up a small bit, you've slowed him down a small bit, so someone should be going to him rather than adding more bodies back. So that's what I don't like stop him up, because again, one of the best scores you can get is a turnover score. If you turn it over the corner, your own corner back, turn the ball over and go up the pitch, that's great. But it's not like turning the ball over in the opponent's half and getting a score. It's a sucker punch, you know. It's great.
Yeah, and again, that comes into skill set and practice and tackling and practice, and as opposed to, like, I feel like your basic club session now is a collection of tactical kind of match situations where you're not actually putting hands on many players. It's kind of a lot of this and a lot of that, and it's like, how else do you, again, it makes it even more important to come your hour early and do your practice, but I don't think the skills are being developed enough. But I just think on a last question for you, your own kids there, say if, you know, a few years down the line, if they're loving the game, which I'm sure they will be, and they're heading out for, you know, a minor championship game, and, you know, when they walk out the door, what's the message that you give, you know, the words that you say before you head out and you'll go down and watch the game later yourself?
Like my son Ben now, he'd be 7 in June, and like where I am now in Ballybuckle, like, it's a fantastic community, it's a fantastic area living in. The club and the structure they have there, the underage coaches are brilliant, and the chairman and the vice chairman all know what they want, and they want the best for the club. So I'm happy to let Ben go up the road, or I bring him up the road and I go for a walk, or I watch how he's getting on, or I go and watch another, like a nursery group train, or the age group above. So I say to Ben, I ask him, what are you going to practice, what are you going to focus on today? You know, the coaches are up there, they'll do catching and kicking, they'll do hand passing, they'll do solo, they'll be in and out of cones. So I just let Ben, I say, what do you want to practice today? And like this morning he was training, I said, what are you going to work on today? He said, I'm going to work on my tackling and my hand pass. So he decided, I'm finished, he's only starting. If he wants to do that, if it's next week he wants to practice the 7-iron, the golf club, we'll be going golfing there.
Yeah.
So, let it be.
But I think that sums up everything with you in terms of that communication and the way that you can communicate with them, and then the emphasis on them leading it and the emphasis on practice, essentially, which and the fact that you're able to do that with your own family, but then you did that with teams as well. Like, so yeah, it was great talking to you. Like, I always say, me playing, like, it was most enjoyable coaches that I've worked with, like to make you feel like 10 feet taller. Like,
and we're still talking, so
yeah.
it must have been something.
Yeah, geez, you
like we like that group of players around that time. Like again, I have to mention it. You know, it was my first time to be involved with players from other counties. I did a bit with Pillar with one of the Railway Cup teams, but that was the first time I'd met players and coached players who had played underage maybe against Dublin. I seen the players that were coming through those couple of years in the freshers in DCU, and I said these are going to be a handful for any Dublin team going forward, and it is with great pride, I have to say, and pleasure, that I look at the guys from Galway and Cavan and Monaghan and Donegal and Roscommon, like all of those guys, doing so well on the Gaelic pitch, and I say that openly. I'm really happy to see them do so well and playing for their counties, and then on top of that to do so well in their fields of business and work, and in particular yourself. You know, like you're a great young lad. Then you're developing to a great man, and I wish you every success.
Cheers. Thanks for everything, Clarke.